Good morning, everyone. Whether or not you decide to include your video and join in that way, you're more than welcome to just continue listening in. But this morning, we are very, very lucky to have Anna Lehman with us. She's a representative of Wildlife Works as well as her own company. Anna, do you want to tell us a little bit more about your own company or project that you've been working on recently?
Sure. Let me do that though. I'll dive right into the presentation because I've got a couple of photos on those slides. So I think I need to start the slideshow from here, right?
Yes.
The share screen. I'll do that. Well, thank you everyone for joining and happy Earth Day to everybody, right? The 50th anniversary, just to get this straight. 50th anniversary. I'm turning 46 in a couple of weeks. I'm closer to the 50, so I feel kind of, in tune with Earth Day. Anything else, but so how is that? I hope you can see that, and hopefully also can still see the faces. Great. Yeah, but actually, the 50th birthday of, or Earth Day is dedicated to climate action, and it sort of marks the global environmental movement, at least from a US American perspective. And well, climate action has been all over the media and, in people's minds, I think, but not so much recently. So COVID really, well, occupied all the other headlines in the news, but obviously the world is treading on, and that's not going anywhere. So I think it's a great opportunity for us today to look into, how that all relates together. And I'd like to speak to you. I'll give you some background on myself and my motivation, and then we'll briefly speak about zoonotic diseases, but also about some other threats to our well-being. And now that we're in lockdown and have, less chance to distract ourselves with all the beautiful things that we usually do, we can hopefully take some time and actually reflect on that. And so we'll do that in the last step. On my background, I'm a trained biologic dynamic farmer initially. That's a bit of, some time ago. I spent the first 5 to 7 years in my professional life interviewing communities all over the world to understand what it takes to feed a family in Asia, in Latin America, and how people care for natural resources, for their forests, for their rivers, and what makes them come together around that. And sort of that knowledge I then later on I took and worked in the UN climate space on climate negotiations, which I've been following for 20 years now, I think. In my current hat as Global Climate Policy Director for Wildlife Works, I work for a forest conservation company. We look for forests that are under threat of deforestation in tropical countries and work with governments and communities to find ways to finance those. And usually I try to get meetings with ministers and talk to them about, the importance of forests and that they do have a value when they're standing, and that there's an alternative to chopping them down. With, not as much progress as I would have liked to have over the last 20 years, I think. I had my Greta Thunberg moment. So a moment in life when I felt whatever, we're trying to do all these good things, but we're not really getting there. And that made me I had to sort of withdraw from my job. I trained as a Pilates teacher and aerial yoga teacher and studied nutrition and set up No Planet B initiative, which is my sidekick. It's a charity here registered in the UK that aims at helping people to live healthier lives, because really, what we eat matters a great deal, not only to our own personal health, but also to the planet, as we'll see in a minute. And it really, I think it was that connection of, connecting the body and the mind, and ultimately the gut, that for me created the breakthrough for me personally to deal with anxiety and family trauma that emerged later on. But also it brought me more clarity professionally, which is a large part of, what makes me get up in the morning, what gives me drive and happiness. And I want to share that connection with you today. but let's start with a bit of the boring science before we go into the fun stuff. Zoonotic diseases and why they're coming after us. COVID-19, a coronavirus, as you will have all heard, those viruses are known as an unknown threat to us. They're not new. You know, this one here is, you know, researchers aren't sure yet. I think is undecided whether they come from a pangolin or from a bat. Some other animal was the host. It later on then got into contact with humans in wet markets in China, where those animals that are like endangered species in most cases are held in very unhygienic conditions. They end up in soups or in other form of food. It's or sometimes medicine, which have a long tradition in certain parts of the world. And from there got into a human, where they became so massively aggressive. As far as I understand, I'm not an epidemiologist, this is still not fully discovered. However, it's not, it does happen, and we can see on the right-hand side, this round pie chart shows us the main drivers of zoonotic diseases. And actually land use change is the biggest one of all of them. And we have cases like malaria is not a zoonotic disease, it's a vector-borne disease. It gets transmitted via the blood from mosquitoes, but malaria is on the rise in areas where we are chopping down trees because we're keeping water still in areas where it usually wouldn't be still, and humans are in parts of the forest where, you know, before that only wilderness would live and wild animals. So land use change is a big driver, obviously for COVID-19. Bushmeat consumption or the trade and consumption of wild animals was, you know, probably the more likely driver behind COVID-19. Ebola is another one that has a very strong link to deforestation actually, and the loss of forests. But they don't always come from elsewhere. You know, we're pretty good at producing our own zoonotic diseases. Where we live, you see this big bubble over the UK, that is the mad cow disease. So they also come from, you know, environments where animals are held in industrial production systems under very often unhygienic, often inhumane conditions. And, you know, it is probably not unlogic or new to us, but sick animals make us sick too. And so ecosystem integrity, though, now only emerges really since recently as a main driver, or, you know, a main factor in preventing disease outbreak. But what science shows us now as well is that with climate change continuing, the risk of further outbreak of zoonotic diseases is increasing as well. So COVID-19 is certainly not the last one to bother us. And let's take a look at the context of what is driving those zoonotic diseases and the interlinkages of our human health. So that's a concept I'd like to introduce you to, which is, it looks a bit complicated, and it actually is very, but it summarizes quite nicely how humans are impacting the planet Earth. So this is developed by a group of scientists. There's a link down there. We can also, by the way, later on, do send us an email if you want to hear, if you want to get any more reading. We send you the reading list together and the references if you want to get into some of the stuff we're talking about here today. So, you know, those scientists came together to identify what actually are the processes and systems that we as humans are impacting, that are endangering the stability of the Earth system. The Earth system is the interactions of land, ocean, and life that together provide the conditions upon which our societies depend. And, you know, the left, I want to draw your attention to the left red one in the left upper corner there, which is the extinction per million species per year. According to those circles determine basically the risk levels that we've reached so far. The green space in the middle is the safe operating space for planet Earth. Then comes the zone of uncertainty, and after that, the high risk zone. And with the current losses in biodiversity that we observe around the planet, you know, scientists are saying that this is becoming a major threat to our life as humans. We've lost in the last since the 1970s, again, actually, since the first Earth Day, we've lost about 76% of freshwater wildlife, about 40% of terrestrial wildlife, and about 40% of marine wildlife. A massive, massive, massive amount. And the main driver behind that extinction is land system change. And the main reason why we change our land systems is because we produce food. And the kind of food that we produce is causing, you know, basically the lower bottom, I have to sneak over my other computer to see that actually, the red sort of piece of cake at the bottom, phosphorus and nitrogen. These are the two main chemical compounds of mineral fertilizer, which we use for most of the food that we produce or that we consume, that we eat on a daily basis. It's very rich in sugars, in white flours, in wheat, in maize, in corn, in palm oil. So all the food that you probably already identified as the foods, you know, that aren't that good for you, really are also driving the continued pollution and intoxication of our environment. The phosphorus and nitrogen levels, that was even for me as a shock. I knew as a farmer, you know, when I was out in China in the field and, you know, sitting there for hours interviewing farmers and understanding how much fertilizer do they put on their little fields that they manage. And then I was, you know, calculating that over the whole village and from there to the county and to the provincial level. And I looked at those numbers and I was in tears and I have to stop myself from crying now because it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And that's the intoxication that we're literally driving with the food that we eat. And it is.
Yeah.
So let me have a drink. I don't know why. I started crying over mineral fertilizer.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's upsetting. I totally understand.
But that is the main driver of our high loss in freshwater wildlife, right? Because we would wonder, why do we lose 76% of freshwater wildlife and 40% of the marine wildlife is still, and only 40% of marine wildlife. But a large part of that is because it's being washed out in the little streams, in the rivers, everywhere. And we can see it in the countryside when I go walking here in Britain. You know, if you see it, if you've got the trained eye, you'll see it. And it still makes me go mad, some of the farming practices. Right, so that's the science. It's the planetary boundaries concept. I really recommend check it out, look it up. The novel entities, by the way, question marks, these are areas that we haven't still, you know, really full understanding of. This is where the microplastics live. This is where the radioactive material live. Yeah. Really important to check this out. Right, going back to biodiversity loss and human health. So there's three main threads that I see from sort of, again, a farming perspective of biodiversity loss and how this directly affects us. One is we have an alarmingly reduced gene pool in food crops and animal species because of the, you know, probably 2,000 food crops that we could technically eat, we only eat about 10 of them. Again, you know, it's sugar, wheat, it's maize, it's soy, and it's a couple of more, but not many, so 12. And because we're losing traditional plants and varieties at such speed, we have a smaller gene pool from which we could also select other varieties that are more resistant to droughts and pests that are coming up. On the other side, we see pests and diseases becoming super aggressive, and COVID-19 is one that affects us humans, but there's others, viruses and funguses in our grain production that are causing massive threats to our harvests worldwide. And yeah, we don't really speak about it, but it's going on, and lots of farmers around the world are super worried about it. We have the risk of declining crops and food availability because of reduced pollination. You know, we've got less insects and bees. I think we're all aware of that by now, which is very worrying. But then we've got the big third worry, which is the extinction of microbes in ecosystems. So the very little, you know, organisms, they are in soil and actually also in our gut. So the loss of soil fertility, that these are the processes, you know, where microbes in the soil actually they're there to store the nutrients and to make it available so that the plants can absorb them. They play an extremely important role, and they do that for the plants, but they also do this for us. And now we've got some, you know, it's very exciting what's happening in science right now. In the last 2 to 5 years, so many more papers came out that speak about the link between the food we eat, the health in ourselves, in our bodies, and our gut, and what that means for our physical and mental health. And I'll speak about a few of those findings. So 1.4 kilogram of your body weight is actually other organisms, right? That's a lot. This is as much as your brain weighs. This is, and they produce about 90%, 90%, this is so much, of the hormones and other information carriers, enzymes that your body can't produce yourself, right? And you need this large variety of organisms because, you know, they all do different things. They produce antioxidants, which are basically the anti-aging treatment for your cells. They produce a food for your immune system, for the immune cells, and you know, and the hormones. And most of them, they cover the walls of your stomach and your colon, and they practically reflect the environment you live in. If you live in a very intoxicated environment, if you breathe, you know, polluted air, and if you eat a very monotonous diet, if you eat the same 10 things every day, then you'll also have a much smaller amount of different microbes in your gut left, right? You won't have that rich ecosystem, that sort of rainforest of microorganisms that you actually need, that your body needs in order to fulfill all its functions and produce all its hormones. 90%. I knew it was high, but I didn't know it was that high. You know, and especially important is that what we eat now, our current diet, the Western diet, is mostly made of a lot of sugar and a lot of white flour, and that gets digested in the very front of your digestive system. So in the stomach, it starts in the mouth actually, and then in the stomach and at the first part of your colon. But that also means with the food that you eat, if it doesn't get to the end part of the colon, then those cells don't have, you know, have no job. They don't really know what they're doing or what to do, and the chances are they'll develop cancer. This is why we're seeing an increase in leaky gut syndrome and in colon cancers in our society right now. And here in Britain, the numbers are nerve-wracking. I think I've got another slide later on with some of the numbers. But so what is important is not only that you've got a lot of those microbes, you also need to have the whole lot of them, the whole variety of them, for you to actually be healthy and be less vulnerable to other environmental shocks that your body might be dealing with. You know, the food system here, and it just feels for us, you know, as a normal diet, you go shopping, you go to Tesco and you buy what you think is food. But actually, as a sum, it poses a threat to us more than it actually nurtures us. It's often too highly processed, doesn't include the nutrients that we need, and is too dense with energy, so we're overfed but undernourished. And the gut flora that it produces within us, you know, it makes, we're practically starving out a large share of those gut bacteria that are good for us, that are doing all the good things. a healthy Westerner, somebody who still has a varied diet, has about 800 to 1,000 different kind of gut bacteria species, varieties. Whereas somebody who, you know, lives in a more traditional way, and indigenous people that we see in some of the places where I've got the privilege to work, those people have, you know, twice as many gut bacteria than we do, and they don't suffer from diabetes. They have straight, full, white teeth, although they've never seen a dentist. They, you know, and they've got their traditional ways of brushing teeth. There is no cancer, or very, very, very rarely is cancer in those societies. And I think, you know, what COVID-19 really shows us actually is how vulnerable we are in the world that we have created. And, you know, I mean, it will take some time until health professionals and scientists will be finally honest with us and will tell us why we are losing so many people right now in the UK compared to other places. Initially, we thought it's the number of ventilators that is defining the survival rate, right? That was, I think, the idea of many of us, but we do see now that it's actually often secondary organ failure. So after, you know, the lung, those people are, you know, obviously in a higher risk group with asthma and with lung problems, but a larger share of people seems to also now pass away because other organs fail. And that could be kidneys, that could be livers, that could be the heart, because it needs to pump at a much higher rate if it needs to pump blood through the body that has a lower saturation with oxygen. So, you know, being the healthiest and the strongest that we can really is a main thing we probably want to do in light of the various risks and threats that our more intoxicated, more hostile environment that we've created is posing to our bodies and to our well-being. And well, and this is where I think lockdown really is an opportunity, and I have to swap my glasses now. I have to put on my lockdown glasses because sometimes, you know, you have to really look through a pink lens and feel like, make yourself feel happy and positive, because you know, as much as I like cooking, yeah, I really don't like it that much that I want to do it 3 times a day. But this is pretty much what we're doing right now. And you know, other people, I don't know how you feel, but for me, I don't fear the virus for my personal health. This is not where my anxiety comes from. My anxiety though comes from like social isolation, not seeing as many people as I want to see, not being able to visit my family, not being able to hang out with friends. And I'm single, and it's like, it's bloody boring. And so, you know, you do need your pink glasses sometimes, but it's also, you know, what I realized is, and I, you know, through some of the work I've done with counselors, through other things in my life, you know, what they teach you very quickly, and they, you know, teach that to soldiers who suffer from PTSD, from, you know, very traumatic events. And in some way what we're going through here is a collective traumatic event, is actually that cooking is a main thing, or is a main activity where you can exercise self-care, you know, and taking control of your day, of what you eat, of what you do, is extremely important. It gives us the feeling that we're in control of our lives, and it lowers anxiety levels. It makes us, it relaxes us. And you know, the celebrities teach it to us. You open like every newspaper now, and I get it at least in my news streams. There is some, you know, there's a lot of talk about food right now, and it brings so much happiness to people, and it brings family together. There's so much joy in it. But it's also important to actually cook the right things. And lots of the diets that I see that are being promoted are actually diets that still, you know, that feed the main gut bacteria that we have, which are the ones that digest sugar and wheat flours. They feed those, and they give us the feeling that we're happy for a short moment in time, but also we will have to go back and eat some more of them in a little bit later because we feel hungry. They're basically screaming through our vagus nerve right up to our brain and go like, we need more food, we need more food. So encouraging you here, enjoy the cooking, but also use lockdown to connect the dots and see, what is actually, what does a diet look like that makes you really feel better and makes you feel less anxious and makes you feel more balanced in your life. And here's another piece of good news. So same couple of those scientists who developed the system of the planetary boundaries, they got together with more nutritionists and farming experts and food experts, and they together did a lot of modeling and invented or defined a diet that actually would feed 10 billion people on this planet by 2050 sustainably, healthily, and we could live happily. And there could be this happy ever after, whatever a situation that we could create if we follow a bit of dietary advice. And it's also the diet that is the best ones for your gut bacteria, the ones that actually increases the diversity. Couple of things we've got to avoid. Vegetables that have traveled a long distance and are wrapped in plastic, they just don't have the microbes sitting on their skin anymore that are good for your gut. So avoid those if you can. Shorten the distance that your vegetables have traveled. If you have a chance, and I know here in Brighton we've got a couple, the Sussex farmer boys, that bring in salads from farmers just in the vicinity where the salad was picked in the morning, and you'll have it in the afternoon or maybe a day before. Those leaves still have those microbes on it. Avoid food that has been produced with pesticides or mineral fertilizer. If you don't know about mineral fertilizer, I won't cry about that anymore. But pesticides, right? Just get this. There's, in certain studies, they could show that the pesticide that was used on a soybean that got eaten by a cow, you start eating that meat, it will still have that pesticide of the soybean in that meat. Now that pesticide still will affect your gut bacteria, right? It will almost function as an antibiotic in your gut bacteria, in your gut, and start destroying those microbes. So really good reason to buy organic food. I know they're more expensive, but some, there's veg boxes out there, there is ways, and I mean, that's certainly something we could do if we wanted to follow on seminar of how to do affordable and healthy food. I'd be very happy to speak about that. One key thing though, and that's the third important thing to do, is avoid added sugar and refined white flour everywhere as much as you can, ideally all of it, and you have to do it for 3 months. That's my personal experience. Some people have very low sugar in their bodies. They might be able to get rid of it earlier. But it really does take some time. You have to literally starve out those bacteria that are sitting there screaming for sugar, making you go mad. They will go away. I promise you they will go away, but you have to starve them out, right? And a good way to starve them out is by eating all these beautiful things. And there is just so much flavor and happiness in there. If you go for vegetables, go for all colors of the rainbow, right? Go for bitter and sharp flavors. At the moment, we've got amazing radishes, new fresh radishes coming out, watercress, fresh herbs. Chuck as many in as you can, mustard leaves, dandelion leaves, it's and literally all the different colors. If you eat beetroot, you probably will have noticed that if you go into the bathroom and your wee is pink, right? And that shows you how the beetroot, the coloring ingredient, right? You eat it, but it goes through your blood, through your organs until it reaches the kidney, and from the kidney it reaches the toilet. So, those substances travel through the full body, and they're sort of lining the arteria, they're juicing joints, they're doing all sorts of things. So variety, again, is absolutely important. Same for nuts and seeds, as varied as you can afford. Sunflower seeds, awesome. Pumpkin seeds, linseeds, flax seeds, hemp seeds, all the nuts you can possibly think of, including peanuts. Not too many of them, obviously. They're expensive, and also they do carry a lot of oil, so we don't need as many. But the variety, again, is super important. Don't just eat almonds if that's your thing, or cashew nuts, right? Really make sure you get the walnuts in there, the Brazil nuts, what ran out of nuts here, hazelnuts, but there's more. Beans, again, the whole variety, obviously not the ones in tomato sauce for the sugar, right? Lentils, chickpeas, that's, and you'll start feeling, once you get rid of the sugar, like I used to make myself a salad and not feel satisfied, I would still feel hungry. Once though those sugar microbes are suppressed, or you've got less of them, and the other ones come up, you'll see that actually those things will give you satisfaction and you will feel fuller. Overall, we need much less starch than we think in starchy vegetables, but we do need some. Ideally go for barley, oat, brown rice, red rice, buckwheat, spelt, all of them wholemeal, very few potatoes, but go for the gluten-free stuff, because the gluten really is, it makes the bread go so fluffy and poppy, and it's really, really nice. Sometimes it's a treat, right? But the body can't actually digest it. You don't have an allergy against it, or you're not intolerant. It's just very normal. Our bodies, we eat way too much of it, and that just sits there like a sponge and really doesn't do anything. Go big on good oils. Get yourself a variety of good cooking oils. Olive oils, again, flaxseed oil, hemp seeds oils, pumpkin seeds oil, grape kernel oils. They're beautiful, and mix them together, make a nice salad dressing out of it. Some yogurt and non-pasteurized cheese. The non-pasteurized cheeses, they also have those microorganisms you really want. And those of you who eat meat, ideally go for game, because these animals will have eaten natural food as much as they can. They're foraging outside, right? That still is the best source of protein. Is also, in Britain at least, the most eco-friendly form of protein, because we don't really have to ship it, and it's abundant. We've got 60% of the deer in the forest in the UK actually needs to be eaten, because for the forests to recover. We have too many animals in the forest right now, and they're eating all the little bugs and all the little plants that are coming up, which is a big, big thing to our biodiversity in the forest. So I have a couple of days a month where I feel I need meat. And so I eat 2-3 times a month. I eat some venison, and I actually love it. Venison stew, it's one of my favorite things, obviously with some nice dumplings. So time, right? One important thing you also to try not to do as you're in lockdown. We know we all need to wash hands. That's really important. Don't over sanitize your house. You need the good bacteria around yourself. So don't go too mental. Do the doorknob, but that's it. And no pesticides in the garden. This is important. Wildflowers and insects and all of that is, it's a good environment for you to sit in, to be in, to breathe that, to touch them, to, and to lick your fingers even afterwards, right? So it's important not to live in a too sterile environment. That's one of the key things really to consider. And once you do all of this, it's really hard sometimes when I'm in the groove and I feel like, fine, I feel like I'm changing the world because I've changed myself and I can feel a change in myself. And then you go outside and then you go shopping and you see people and you just go like, oh my God, this is not working. This is just not working. How is this ever gonna work? But it's, the important thing is connect with the people around you that share your values and that do the same thing, that give you the feeling and encourage you to keep on. And keep in mind, we don't have to convince everyone. People who study mass movements of why do people now, in Germany, for example, there was a big movement, we exited from nuclear power. That didn't come from our chancellor, right? Angela Merkel had nothing to do with that. That was the public consciousness, the public perception, the public mood has changed. And these shifts happen, right? We do certain things we don't like here anymore. And those shifts happen not when everybody gets convinced and everybody is behind us. We just need a critical mass of people. And that critical mass, I feel, is growing and growing and growing. And especially in COVID-19, where we see now in the lockdown time, you know, we feel so much more connected. Ironically, right? We don't see as many people, but lots of my friends keep saying, and I feel the same, we've actually been talking to each other more in a week than we would in the normal life, right? We even speak to families, you know, some more because we take the time because we're all at home and we have more time at hand. And in using that time to share this, share your well-being, but also, you know, share what inspires you and what you want to do, and keep carrying over some of those good decisions you might take today after lockdown. And this is how we'll do it. This is how we will shift. How we'll transform ourselves. How we will heal our gut bacteria, our ecosystem in ourselves, and the ecosystem around us. The other slide, I don't know what that was. Well, thank you very much. I wanted to say thank you. But also, we thought we would like to leave you with a sugar challenge. So, you know, if you like, join us. And if you want to try to get rid of sugar in your life, I would say put all the sugar products, identify them in your kitchen first, put them to one side, and then halve them, right? Don't have to leave them all. If you can't leave them all, you know, do cold turkey, go to cold turkey. That's awesome. But if not, then do start halving them. And as you ramp up on all the good foods. And yeah, it'll be awesome to check in with you later on and see how you're doing with all of that.
Amazing. Thank you, Anna. That was so great. That was so great. I'm sure that some people have questions. I know I do. I'm going to start a poll soon. Let's see if I can do this. I switched to my phone, so I'm going to try my best to do this from my phone. But if not, let me see if I can join on my computer. Yeah, that was so great. I'm going to ask one of my own personal questions in the time being. I was just wondering, when you're buying bread, you mentioned how it's better to get, you know, the rye bread, the sort of denser bread. I find it like when I go to the grocery store, I reach for the wheat bread, but it's like soft. What is that? I don't know what that even is, but while I'm joining, if you could answer that, I'm just curious.
Yeah. You know what? So bread is really hard in Britain, sadly, to get because it's most of it is wheat, which is best avoided. I would say in the radical phase, if you really want to starve out your bacteria, I would say go for spelt bread and for pumpernickels, like, you know, that kind of dark bread, for just for the time you want to starve the bacteria out. Afterwards, I mean sourdough, because in Germany we do sourdough bread mostly with rye bread actually, but here it's also wheat. But if the sourdough has been rested by, I think it needs to rest at least 12 hours, so overnight, then the bacteria in the sourdough will have turned the, be eaten up the gluten basically. And so go for sourdough bread and really ask the bakers, how long did your sourdough rest? You know, a good grocery store will that. And if they don't know, they'll still feel uncomfortable and they'll try to find out. So it's always good. I figure it's always good to ask.
Cool. Thank you. Sorry, I'm gonna try to close this.
No worries. I mean, feel free to unlock or unmute everybody else in case. I'd be happy to
answer more questions. Let's do it. So, hello everyone. If you have any questions, now would be a good time to ask, and then afterwards I will be holding a poll and we can discuss what you are interested in discussing. Yeah. Let's see. I'm gonna unmute some people. All right. And perfect. In the meantime, I'm gonna also, and let me know if you guys received this, but we have a poll here. If you could answer the poll, then we can decide what we're going to discuss further. Thank you. Cool, I'm starting to get some answers. Give you a little bit more time in case you're interested. Okay, wow, a huge variety of answers. Okay, so it seems like the top three, happy diet recipes and kitchen tips seem to be really popular. The body, gut, and brain, and biodiversity and extinction. So those seem to be the top three. There's also a little bit of interest in the current food system. So let's discuss further.
Right. Well, I was actually thinking that to do, that's polls for maybe a follow-up session, because obviously that's quite a bit. I'd love to speak about the food system if you want to hear about actually, how concentrated this is, and understand how the fertilizer, the pesticide, and the seed industry is clogged together producing what we're eating. But that is more like nightmare stuff, right? This is not what's going to make you happy in lockdown.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you'll need a drink after.
Yeah. For the time being, do you have any other, maybe some recipes or kitchen tips that you just off the top of your head could share?
Sure. I mean, when I started doing this, and bearing in mind, right, I was a really dynamic farmer, so I've been eating like this actually since I was little, because I come from that kind of family where food was always the thing, and that's what we spent all our money on. That's or most of it. I thought I'd be healthy, but like really being that strict about it, it required me, I had to go and find new shops where I would really get those fresh vegetables, like where I would buy, for example, a lot in Taj, because I thought that's kind of nice, but a lot of that gets imported, and most of the vegetables in the supermarket is traveling from Spain or from Holland, comes from really far away. So taking some time and and have a wander around now and really check out what's available, what's actually out there. I think that's the first step. And then you obviously need to get more jars where you put in all these nuts and seeds. They all need to have a place, right? Yeah. And so it took me to reorganize the kitchen in some way, and also because you want to make it easy, And then one thing is that I found quite annoying. It takes up, of course, it takes up more time, and in lockdown we got this time, but like after lockdown, how do you then deal with that? And I'm a busy woman, I work a lot, and I travel, so for me it really comes down to organizing my week in a way that I take half a day. It's often a Sunday, but sometimes I just even take some time out of work where I bulk cook, so I make a big stew of some sort, some chickpea vegetable stuff, and then little vegetables at a side that I put in the fridge and prepare, or I just fry a large amount of tofu that I can then chuck in. So you combine those dishes and make like big bowls of it. Yeah. But I love them now. And when I travel, one of the hardest things I find is dealing with the food change and making sure I keep eating that diet, because you'll notice once you've changed, gone through the transformation, and then you go back and you go like, oh, I really, why not? I'm just going to go for a burger. I have some fish and do that. You'll actually eat it and you go like, oh, this is a bit bland. And then you sit there and you feel it. You literally feel it, and you just wonder like, how did I felt like it makes me unconscious, and I was like, what? How could I even live like this before? How could I have enjoyed this kind of food that is making my body so slow and so tired? That's an really interesting experiment, I think.
Yeah, for someone interested in joining the sugar challenge, which is, if you could go into specifics of like what that looks like, then how do they, I guess, like you said, having the amount of sugar that's already in their pantry is a great way to start. I guess, like, when you are having those like craving, those withdrawals, like how do you handle that on the day to
How do
day?
you get those through? This is really, I think, where you need to work with your body as much and with everything else that you have available, right? Because what's happening is you've got those bacteria, they're signaling to your vagus nerve, which is sort of, the gut has its own nervous system, right? And that communicates directly to the brain. So they're gonna keep yelling for sugar for a long time, right? But if you eat sugar, the body produces endorphins and makes you feel a bit high and happy for those short moments. So find a different way of getting endorphins. Whatever else gives you pleasure in life, like what are your favorite things? I don't know. Is it dressing up? Is it
I love that, Jessica. Yeah.
Right? I mean, this is what I started in lockdown, against, like, just for morale and for keeping my own spirits up. It's not a self-care thing. It's just like, do what you like. So I started wearing, my festival outfits at home while I was cleaning or cooking, and it just put me in a good mood. Put music on, right? Look after yourself in a way, but also I found, because there is this feeling of hunger that persists, even though your body is actually not hungry, right? I just took time for about the first week of that, or maybe even the first 2 weeks. I spent a lot of time in the kitchen, because that kept me the feeling that I'm feeding myself, and I nibbled on all sorts of things, on carrots, on salads, on the vegetables. Just chop them up. You can have as many of those as you like, right?
Yeah.
And just keep cooking. Then just cook for 2 days, but just make sure you don't touch sugar, right?
Yeah.
And everything else you can have, and do some fancy dishes. Look up some recipes that you find challenging and take the time to do that, right?
Yeah, for sure. That's
It's
great.
distraction. It's really just distraction, but I promise you, after, it will get better with every week.
Yeah. And I think, like, from my perspective, when I was first listening to this talk, when we practiced it, I remember thinking, like, oh, interesting. The environment is so directly tied to my own personal nutrition. And I guess that was like a hard thing initially for me to like grasp, because I was like, why is it that you know what I mean? And some of the things that you pointed out, I think, really make sense. So could you kind of reiterate the like main reasons why your personal nutrition is such a huge factor into the environment, and something to celebrate right now on Earth Day?
That's right. Well, it really is about diversity and ecosystem integrity, as we call this sort of in jargon, in science jargon, right? But that also means the world is made up of a lot of different things, and everybody's got their role, right? In a forest, there's or in our landscape, there would be a lot of different animals and a lot of different plants, and they all have their functions. And the same thing is happening in your gut. You've got all these the variety of bacteria in your gut that you really need for your body to get all the nutrients that it needs, right?
Yes.
To be happy and to be stable. So that biodiversity out there, if you're scared of like lots of insects and stuff we literally see, that should be directly the feeling of, oh my God, and so what is then happening inside me if I keep eating a very monotonous diet? And especially if it's a very energy dense diet. Energy dense means a lot of carbohydrates, right? And sugar and starches are all carbohydrates, which is why we need to get those out, get the energy dense foods out, processed foods out, because those bacteria will practically kill the other bacteria.
Wow, that's so cool. If anybody's interested in asking questions, I'll be unmuting people, and you're more than welcome to ask a question before we wrap up. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you. I thought it was absolutely fascinating, especially everything you're saying about sugar. It's so true. I find that if I have chocolate at, let's say, 4 o'clock on one day, 4 o'clock comes the next day and my body is telling me to eat the same thing again, and it's so hard to break that cycle. The only question I have is just like, when you're in that state, when all you can think about is something really sugary, is there anything you recommend eating that isn't sugary but would satisfy that craving the same way?
Well, I guess we're all different, right? I really love, I love carrots. I should also say though, I have not stopped fruit sugar. So I have not gone down the full, I've not, I've not been that radical actually. So I would have an apple, or have a banana, or even just half a banana. One full banana is quite a lot of sugar in it. But what I love is, actually, there's like granolas. Make yourself a granola with honey. So I spend a lot of time toasting seeds because that's super yummy, right? And it's nice smell. So you toast sesame seeds and pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds. Add a bit of desiccated coconut to it or something, and some cinnamon. Make this really smell really nice, and then let it dry out basically, and sprinkle some honey over it. So you got honey. Honey's allowed. In my kitchen, honey's allowed. I'm such a sweet tooth, I couldn't do it without any. But then get some yogurt. Obviously, you have to still dose it. You can't have too much of that. But get some really nice live yogurt. Half a banana in it, and your granola. That's my kind of treat. Or tahina is awesome, right? Because you get it in every shop here. It's sesame. It's pure sesame paste. There's nothing in it usually. And date syrup. Dates is allowed in my kitchen too. A little bit of date syrup, right? Very traditional Arabic food. And then you can get even some non-sweet dry crackers or something. There's rye crackers I sometimes take, or other quinoa crackers or something, and you dip into those, but you've got this really creamy sesame thing that makes it rich and satisfying, and a bit of sweetness from the date syrup. These are the kind of things that help me get away from refined sugars.
I think Laura, I hope I said that right, has a question. She was saying if you have any suggestions and low sugar options for a restricted budget. For example, like food banks mostly offer rice and pasta. Yeah.
That's that really is a big problem here in the UK, I think, and I've not, to be fair, so with the organization that I started, No Planet B Initiative, I was reaching out to food banks and to the food project here to find out what kind of food they're promoting, and they get the food that is left over. And if you look in the supermarkets, what is it people grabbing from the shelves? It's pasta and it's bread. So supermarkets think that this is what we want, and this is then often also what is being donated. I have to say I have not much experience in that. I'm probably not the right expert to ask, but my advice would be speak to the food bank and tell them, this is not good. This is not healthy food, and can they get other can they get other donations from elsewhere?
Yeah.
We also have, with a group of friends here, actually, because affordability is one thing. The other thing is really time and consuming. There's only so many places where I feel like I can safely eat when I go for lunch options and stuff. But I don't like cooking as much as I do it. So a friend of mine, we are thinking about a community kitchen concept, and actually people getting together and cooking together. Infinity, by the way, has an amazing offers on their website. You can see that they would buy bulk. So if you get together with neighbors or your communities, you could buy, especially like legumes, I would just buy it in really large sacks.
Yeah.
And beans, for example, and chickpeas, I don't take tins anymore, because that's just another, it's just another packaging that we don't really need, because you can easily soak chickpeas overnight. Just do this your routine, right? And your beans, just chuck them in overnight and you cook them. Chickpeas are really quickly done in 20 minutes. Beans, many of them you need to cook for a little longer, but so what? You cook them longer, you know, just put them on a very.
It's so true. I worked for a nonprofit, and we created vegetarian meals with food from the food banks, as well as food donated from restaurants that had leftovers. So what we noticed was that if you bought in bulk, like beans, legumes, it was so much more affordable. So I definitely recommend buying those items in bulk, the dried items that you can have if you are on a budget. That definitely rings true.
But it's also, like, to be honest, I've started, or we haven't really gotten to the bottom of this yet. Some friends of mine who were in a similar position, they said they couldn't afford that kind of food, but now they seem to be able to afford a veg box together from farmers, right? And because it really is about changing also the diet and changing what you spend money on, you know. And I can't really, you know, obviously not judging, but some things that always struck me was how much some of my friends spend on alcohol as compared to food, whereas I would spend much more on food, less on alcohol. Right. You know, I'm not saying we shouldn't drink or anything, although it's a good thing, you know, to avoid a hangover in lockdown. It's not a good thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, and as we travel less and keeping the importance in mind, like what really matters in your life right now, what do you want to spend your money on? For me, food was always very high up in the lists, but I'm also, you know, privileged and have that choice. I know that many people don't.
Yeah, thank you. If there's any more questions, please let us know now. All right. Waiting. Okay. It seems like we have successfully wrapped up. Do you have any final words for us, Anna?
No, I think I've spoken enough, but well, do let us know if you'd like to have another check-in or, you know, another deep dive into any of those fields. Sophia, maybe you and I can talk about this. It really energized me. Thank you for spending, you know, this hour on Earth Day with me and talking this through. This really energized me and made me very, very happy for today.
Yeah, it was amazing, and it's honestly so informative and such a positive thing that you can carry on. I'm definitely going to be trying the sugar challenge, so fingers crossed, and I'll tell you how it goes. All right, well, thank you very, very much. I'm going to be ending this meeting, lovely, and I hope everyone has a great Earth Day.
Yeah,
good day, guys.
Celebrate it. Go out. Yeah. Go to nature. You know, find nature and indulge in it. That's what I do today.
Cool. Bye, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.